Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to a Take of Zooming with Kaymitch. I'm your host, Kayla Mitchell, and I'm excited to be back with more takes and episodes. I have a very special guest that's going to be on soon. Without further ado, I'm going to wait on him to get on. He's ready, so let me go ahead and add him.
Hey Kayla, how you doing?
Hello, hello. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm so sorry for my tardiness. I had all intentions on waking up to that alarm, and I guess I slept past that thing.
It is okay. I'm happy that you're on and that I'm able to get this Zoom with you. I've been wanting to have you on for a while. I really appreciate you carving out some time for me to be on. You see me, I'm repping the brand as well. So you
I
see.
appreciate it. Yeah,
Okay, so getting started with the interview, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit?
most definitely. My name is Marquis Hill, better known as Realmjhill on social media. I'm 19 years old, and I'm a motivational speaker. I'm an author, a clothing brand owner as well. The brand Love Yourself. Appreciate you rocking the hat today,
Yeah.
Kayla. And we're just on this mission of spreading that self-love message through everything we do.
Before I get started, I just want to say, like I said, thank you again. I follow you and I've been following you for a while since we met that one time and it's just a joy seeing what you're able to accomplish and do and spread to the community, not just, where you're from, but all over, right? So I just want to get started. I just want to commend you again. I appreciate it. I love, motivational speakers and people that are willing to, use their voice for something positive and good to impact others, right? So, starting off, my first question is what inspired you to start your journey as a motivational speaker and author at such a young age?
So I made a big transition when I was in eighth grade.
Hmm.
Basketball had been my biggest passion, my biggest purpose, I feel. And like that's what I dedicated, every single day to. Like I was stay in the gym, as a kid. Ever since I was in third grade, I played on my father's we had a park district team.
Uh huh.
I played on his team for, 3 years. And then we ended up making that move to Georgia from Chicago. I had been, playing AAU. I stayed in the gym as a young kid. And it was in like the summer of my eighth grade year. I was outside, I was playing basketball, and I went to make this move, as I was training, and I felt this really sharp pain in my chest.
Hmm.
So, I remember I ran into the house. I talked to my mom. I was like, "Hey, ma, I just felt this sharp pain in my chest. Like, can we go to the doctor?"
Hmm.
So we end up, booking an appointment, going to the doctor. The first doctor I go to, we go into the doctor's office. Like, he takes a stethoscope and he puts it up to my chest,
Hmm.
and he's like, "Listen, I don't know if my ears are playing tricks on me, but I think I hear three beats."
Wow.
And I'm like, I know your heart's not supposed to beat three times in a row, right? That's not the frequency it's supposed to go out.
Hmm.
So I asked him, I was like, what do you mean by that? And he was like, look, my ears make you playing tricks on me. So I suggest you go to a cardiologist.
Hmm.
So he ends up like recommending us to this cardiologist. We go in, and like the doctor comes in, he puts me on like this table, and he like takes some x-rays of like my chest and my heart. And when he came back with his results, he said, like, we found that you have a heart murmur.
Wow.
And like to explain that in like simple terms, he basically said that I had some holes in my heart that was like allowing blood to go to places it didn't need to go.
Hmm.
And if I didn't take, the time like to heal them
Hmm.
and kept training on them as I was, like it could be detrimental to my health. So he told me I had to take 6 to 8 weeks off from playing basketball. And if that healing process didn't go as planned and the holes didn't heal up, in full, that I couldn't play basketball at the that I aspired to.
Wow.
So for me in eighth grade, it was like a big shock, and it felt like my biggest dream of basketball was like being snatched away from me. But looking back on it, it was really during that 8 weeks, right? Those 2 months that I had to put down that ball and just ask myself, who else is Marquise? Where I found my passion for speaking. Like during that time that I couldn't play basketball, I picked up my phone. I started making these daily motivational videos.
Hmm.
And I remember like in that moment, it was like I may be going through a hard time in my life, but like, why can't I help another person that may be going through a
Wow.
hard time in theirs?
Wow. Yes.
So so it was, a mental, it was a mindset shift of let me put all of the energy that I gave basketball, let me put that leadership that I gave basketball, into another passion. And, I really found that in speaking. And, it started off with just videos and, eventually had videos
Mhm.
go viral.
Yeah.
And, like from those videos going viral, reaching, the youth on so many different levels. I was like, this is my purpose. Like I had, you reaching out to me,
Mhm.
telling me certain things like that they were going through, certain things that they were dealing with mentally. And sometimes they didn't feel like they had that outlet and, that outlet to express themselves, people to talk to. And I was, honored to take on that role, to be that positive voice for the youth. And,
Woo.
like that's really what inspired me to make that transition.
First of all, I gotta say, do you know how grounded you have to be in the 8th grade to come to the realization like, man, I can't play a sport. How else can I impact? Like being the
Yeah,
8th grader to know what you want to do and be a motivational speaker, you don't see that no more. So I just want to commend you for being so grounded. That speaks for your parents and just the upholding of what you built on. To be that grounded as an 8th grader, be like, man, I can't play the game that I love, but I can still, somehow sacrifice my time to help others and use my voice in a different way. Man, how powerful that is. That's very inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing that story.
thank you.
Also, I know like with your brand, your love yourself. Can you share a particular moment or experience that was like, okay, this is where I know you talked about, being a motivational speaker, but what did the self-love and the resilience kind of come from?
So I would speak specifically to my experience in middle school.
Mhm.
I think when we are very young,
Mhm.
we have a very free spirit. We don't really think as much about what other people may think about us. We may not be as self-conscious and insecure about certain things, right? Because we just live in life. We don't even know
Right,
what judgment really looks like.
right.
I know for myself, I started feeling that insecurity and like that self-consciousness a lot when I was in middle school, and I started to look outside of myself for
Mhm.
validation. And like whether like that was like, in friendships, right? I was constantly looking outside of myself for, validation, to please other people, to make somebody else happy, right? And within that, I lost myself.
Mhm.
And I know for myself, definitely throughout that time, what was so important for me was like, I gotta find who Marquis is. I gotta ask myself, you know, what does Marquis like? What makes Marquis happy? Everybody else's opinion, what other people have to say, the judgment of other people, in that moment, it feels so heavy at a young age, right? And I understand it. It feels like, man, I have to change. But one thing that I realized as I love myself more, as I started putting myself first, as I stopped caring as much about other people's opinions and what they had to say about me, it
Mhm.
gave me a different type of freedom, just to express every part of who I am.
Mhm.
And within that expression, within me loving myself, it gives you a different type of power, right? It gives you a different type of opportunity, because what you realize is a lot of people want that. A
Yeah,
lot of people
yeah.
really want to be themselves. And
Right.
you may not even realize it, but you being yourself gives other people the opportunity to do the same thing.
It sure yeah.
So for me, like in 8th grade, I feel like I started to come more into myself, and I started to, care less about what other people think about me. And I know in that moment, it was still a battle to kind of go
Right.
back and forth, right?
Mhm.
Not something that you'll get just, in the snap of a finger,
Mhm.
but it's a process. And I know that's really where it started for me. At the end of my junior year of high school, that's why I ended up starting my brand, Love Yourself, because that had been like one of the biggest messages I was speaking on. Self-love, making sure that you filling your own cup
Mhm.
up and prioritizing your mental health.
Mhm.
That was one thing, that was one of my biggest messages I pushed. And I was like, clothing, that's always been something that I love. And I
Mhm.
felt like it was a way that we speak
Yeah.
without saying a single thing.
Mhm.
So of course I can write do a motivational speech. I can encourage you to love yourself, but I also want what I wear to speak volume.
Mhm.
And when it came to my brand, it was less about the hoodie and it was more about that message, right?
Mhm.
Like when you look at, somebody wearing a love yourself hoodie, like you go read it, you go know, okay, they loving themselves, but you
Yeah.
also might ask yourself the question, like, am I loving myself? So, when it came to starting my own brand, that was really the inspiration for it. Just continuing to spread that self-love message and encouraging the people that's rocking it, to be comfortable in who they are, to express who they are, and to
Mhm.
love themselves more. So that was like really where like that love yourself message came from. And also, just on that mental health side,
Yeah.
I used to be very hard on myself,
Mhm.
mentally, striving for perfection, right? As an athlete, as a student, trying to, please and live up to everybody's expectations.
Right.
And, that hindered me a lot because although I would be making progress, I wouldn't give myself the proper credit that I deserved, right? I wouldn't
Right.
give
Yeah.
myself grace, understanding that I'm a human being. I'm not always going to be perfect. So on that mental health side, that was definitely one thing that I had to work on, right? Not striving for perfection, but just striving for progress.
Mhm.
And like losing somebody very close to me due to mental health, like that was one thing that I took on as like a big mission of mine. If
Mhm.
I can encourage one person, right,
Ooh,
to love
yeah.
themselves,
Yep.
to be comfortable in themselves, right, to put themselves first, I feel like you could save a life. So that's like the whole, mission behind that message.
Man, you so powerful, but yes. Oh my gosh, that is so important. Like when I first seen your brand, I genuinely loved it because I'm a definitely like a clothing connoisseur. But it was just like you said, it's behind the brand. When I got to talk to you and you was telling me your mission, it makes people like, man, like you said, it makes them reflect like, am I loving myself? Am I showing myself grace and stuff like that? As you know, like how big social media is, it can sway you one way or it can sway you another, right? So it's like, am I going to live up to the judgment of others or am I going to be myself, and follow the mission that God has for me and my plan and just know that to be comfortable in myself, right? We live in a world where you can be judged in an instant just by one photo, right? So how can I, love myself and still show like, man, like to give myself grace at the end of the day to know like
Right.
I'm not perfect, right? But I'm going to strive to be the best me that I can be and to have a brand, showing like, hey, I love myself. It's giving other people peace just by reading it. I'm telling you,
Mhm.
man, that's so powerful.
For
Oh,
sure. Thank you.
yes. Next question. You do a lot of speaking everywhere, all over. How do you tailor your messages to different audience, such as like different schools and sports team and organizations to ensure like that the engagement is impactful for them?
For me, my biggest focus is all about the pain points of the specific team or organization.
Mhm.
Every speaking engagement that I go into is not about Marquis. It's about the audience. It's about that student. It's about that coach, that teacher. And that's how I approach all of my speaking engagements because as long as I can tap into them, my job is done.
Mhm.
Right. I know for myself when I do speaking engagements to sports teams, right? I try to identify, okay, what's the problem and what solution are we trying to find?
Mhm.
For certain sports teams, it may be a lack of work ethic that we trying to gain. For some teams, it may be right a lack of leadership, right? Somebody needing to take on that leadership role. For some teams, it may be, like the coaches want to learn more how they can pour
Mhm.
into their athletes and, like help their athletes in their journey. So really finding the pain points for, like the certain teams. When I go into different schools, is understanding what's your mission? Like, where do you want these students to go? How are you trying to impact the students? And then on the student side, really tapping into their world and seeing what do they want, right? Like, what do they feel they're missing? I feel like as long as I can focus on exactly what they need and, communicate with them, articulate that, I feel like I can, impact
Mhm.
on the best level that I possibly can. But I focus less on myself, all on the audience, just
Mhm.
seeing exactly what they're dealing with and how I can help them overcome it.
Right, because that's important. And I think too, it speaks. speaks to you with you being so young, right? You've been in their it been in their shoes. You can tell your journey, and they listen to that. They grasp to your voice, and also adults from as well, because they're
Mhm.
seeing how impactful you are for the youth. So they got to think, okay, if what if this was my daughter, my son, my niece, my nephew?
Right.
Look at how he's, impacted other. And it's like, man, like the adults are like, man, I got to listen to this man right here. And so I listen and watch a lot of, like, when you post on Instagram, and it just how you have them so engaged is just like, wow, because you can have, you have those, motivational speakers or people that come in and talk, and you see kids just kind of wondering off. But when you got all eyes on you, your voice is speaking volumes. That's awesome. That's
For
awesome.
sure.
Another question. What challenges